Welcome to TFP, the Theater Folk podcast. I'm Lindsay Price, resident playwright for Theater Folk. Hello, I hope you're well. Thanks for listening. Today, I'm talking to Tasha Do'zia-Earley. Oh, I love that name. And we're going to get into movement and the student actor. Tasha sent us a note on Facebook recently about using my play Emotional Baggage with her students as an introduction to the LaVon technique. And I knew as soon as I read that, I wanted her on the podcast. Specific expressive movement is hard for the student actor to grasp. So how does Tasha do it? Let's find out.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I am very happy that I have with us today Tasha Do'zia-Earley. Hello, Tasha.
Hello. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much for spending some of your Saturday with me. So first, tell everybody where you are in the world.
I am in Winchester, Virginia.
Awesome. Were you spared in this winter weather we've been having?
No, we got about 18 inches here.
All I can say is I'm glad I'm not Atlanta, where the ice just brought the entire place to a standstill.
Yes.
At least I'm in a place, I don't like winter, but at least I'm in a place that can handle it.
Right.
So the reason that I wanted to have Tasha on the podcast is that she sent us a Facebook message just a little while ago. And Tasha, do you remember why you sent us a message?
I sent you the message because we being my company, just used Emotional Baggage, one of your wordless pieces, as our whole session, getting my kids used to movement without words. And it was a great introduction to Laban movement, which is what we've been studying all of February.
And I just think that's so fascinating because Laban it's a movement-based technique, correct?
Yes.
Tell everybody, before we just get into specifics, just give a little a sort of Cole's notes about what Laban is.
Laban it's a theory created by...
He was a gentleman, correct?
Yes. He was a dancer and choreographer, Rudolph Laban. And he strongly believed that we as a people have lost the communication language of using our bodies. That how we communicate as a people is entirely based on body movement, including how we speak is based on internal body movement. So he created this great analysis and theory that both dancers, choreographers, and actors use.
Can you think of a really simple example of an exercise?
Sure. There is simple exercise that I always start off, even with my younger 8-year-old kids, which is about space, being aware of space, the space that you're walking in. So I have them walk around the room. And I have them walk around the room in every inch. I tell them, fill up every inch with your feet and with your hands. Make sure every inch of the space is filled up with your body as a group. And where we go from that is essentially we become different characters, whether it's an animal or a particular person. And from there, we learn about indirect and direct movement. So, for example, if I'm a Walmart cashier and I'm late checking in, to start my shift, how would she move across the room? So yeah, being completely aware of space.
What is so fascinating about all of this is that when I think of a group of people who have such a defined body language, it's youth, it's children and teenagers. They say so much with how they hold their bodies and how they are holding their bodies and when they say something. And yet, when you are working with student actors, one of the hardest things to do is to get them to physically express.
Right. It's very, very difficult for them because they are just becoming their own person, basically. You're starting to separate yourself from your mom and your dad and your family and starting to become more and more of who you hang out with, what your interests are, and so on. So it's really hard for them to get out of that frame of mind. A lot of people would think that senior citizens would be harder because they're stuck in their ways, but actually teenagers in particular tend to be more stuck in their ways.
Isn't that funny? What a great way of explaining it, that they're just sort of getting used to their bodies in a sense. And is that why you think it's so hard for them to create other characters?
I think it is. And I think as a director or as a drama teacher, if you take the time to really focus on the movement and the body movement of a character as far as developing your character, that's an essential piece. A lot of I judge competitions all throughout the year. And one of the biggest notes or critiques that I give to directors is really spend time, really dive into the character as far as how their physicality are. A lot of these high schoolers, they play older people. They play older characters, people who are experienced in life. And you could tell that a teenager is playing a role. Oh, this is just a teenager pretending to be an adult, as opposed to this is an actor who did a very great job of being an adult.
I recently judged, when I judge individual events all the time, I need a little stamp that says, character-driven movement, character-driven movement. Stop shuffling your feet. Stand your ground and make a choice.
Move with purpose.
Yes.
Even indirect movement, indirect meaning even if your character is aimlessly walking around, have a purpose behind that. Each movement should have a purpose. My mentor, Baudet, she would always say, don't move unless you have an intent. And she could tell, and she would, that would be part of our production notes is, why did you move here? And you'd be like, what are you talking about? But she would be able to pick up on that because that one shred of movement that is out of your character and more of you as an actor can really destroy the character as whole.
So how long have you been really sort of focused on teaching students movement like this?
I've been teaching for 8 years, and it started from when I was 21. And Baudet, as I mentioned before, is my mentor. I had a really, really tough time with a particular character that I was playing in college, and I could not get connected to this character at all. And it was very frustrating. And the way that Baudet introduced us into digging deeper into our characters at that point in time was through movement. Don't say anything, just do. What is the weight? What is the burden of your character? What is she thinking as she's walking across the stage? And if she's thinking something that's burdened, is it heavy? Or is she thinking something that's happy? Is she light? What is the timing of her movement? Does she walk fast? And if she does, why? Is she always in a hurry? Is she always late? Does she walk slow? Is she depressed? So we did a lot of walking.
Well, that's the thing you want to do when you've paid your money and you're 21, right? And you want to walk.
So we did a lot of walking, and we also did a lot of flocking as a group.
Oh, what's that?
Flocking is basically, just as it sounds, like a bird flock.
Ah.
You have one person that starts as the point, and the rest of us file as a triangle of a flock. And we start with movements, and as you move, the flock turns, according to the person that's leading it, and then a new leader is up front. So as the flocking and the movement is happening, each person will eventually be pushed to the front and be able to direct the group. So you learn how to, it's a great bonding point for ensemble members because you sort of have to get out of that diva or devo frame of mind, and you have to follow even, the smallest character that's in your ensemble at some point in time.
Each person has to be the leader and each person has to be the follower, which is basically an essence of what ensemble is, right?
Yeah.
You must always work together. Yeah. So how difficult is it to teach students, Laban?
I wouldn't say it's really difficult. It's definitely challenging. And I know a lot of the times my teenagers get very upset with me or frustrated with me, which is fine.
How come?
Because they do not know yet how to develop a character for self-gratification as opposed to doing what they think will satisfy me. And the more I push and the more that I coach, the more they feel that I am not satisfied, which is not the case at all. It's literally me pushing them further and deeper into what they can go. If you can go deeper, I'm going to push you to go deeper. So it's not so much about satisfying the teacher. This is not school where, you have to write exactly what your English teacher wants you in order to get that A. It's not like that at all. It's about taking risk and eventually being happy with yourself as an actor. So that can be a very challenging point for my kiddos.
Is there a point where it's sort of the light of connection sort of hits them and they get it?
Yeah. And when that happens, it's breathtaking as a teacher because you're like, by George, they got it. And I don't think, most of the times, I do not think that they themselves even know what has happened. Usually it strikes some kind of reaction out of me. For example, we're working on a wordless skit ourselves. They were inspired by emotional baggage to create a wordless skit. And there was one particular girl of mine that's just like, I just don't know what to do. And I said, you have to observe outside of, your parents and your family. Go to Walmart and just sit in the middle of Walmart and find somebody and follow them and just follow their every movement and just take that and then bring it here and then play with it. And she brought a lot to the table just a couple of weeks ago. And I was completely floored because I was just like, oh my gosh, what did you do? She said, I did what you told me to do. I found somebody and I thought that my character was connected to how they were moving. And I just watched them, I observed, and I brought it here. And I was like, yes!
And that's the point where you jump up and down and you do the dance of joy that, and then the teenagers look at you and go, what are you doing? Okay, so let's get into emotional baggage. Why did it work for you?
It worked because it took us an hour to get through. And how we did it was I read out the direction of movement for them and they had to create the movement. So the only person speaking was me.
And I should also I'm just going to interrupt and say that emotional baggage is a play without words for those listening who don't know. And it is completely stage directions and actions. It's 8 people in a train station who carry emotional baggage as if it is physical baggage. And then there's someone who is completely free who comes in.
Right.
Okay, stop.
They had to rely on what I was telling them, and they had to rely on their own imagination and thought process as far as, interpreting what I was saying to them. So I was the only one speaking. For teenagers, as you know, it can be very difficult for them not to giggle and sniggle and not to talk for a whole hour, but they did. And they did a very good job. At the end, they were exhausted, which was why it was such a big success for me. Because I was like, yes, because they actually had to use their bodies and their minds. And so it was 2 things working at one time, and they were very frustrated, but they were also enlightened and wanted to do more.
What do you think made them get it? What made them be frustrated and then work through as opposed to frustrated and give up?
I think they were starting to see how the story was unraveling. It was like a cold reading for me and for them to interpret. So they had no idea what the plot was. And at first it was a little bit frustrating. It's a lot of repetitive movement for each character because that's a great way to distinguish each individual character without words. And so they were like, the janitor, the one who played the janitor was like, why am I still doing this, picking up the trash and putting it in my pouch and picking up trash? But as the story evolved, you saw the little light bulbs above each of their heads by the time we introduced the carefree character. And they were like, oh, we get it. And so they kept persevering on.
And so this sort of led them to now you are working on a wordless play of their own.
Right.
What's the topic?
The topic is basically abandonment.
Oh, wow.
It is about a mother who, it starts off very happy, and we're doing ours in phrases. And it starts off as a very happy moment, a happy family with an older sister, younger sibling, and a middle sibling. And eventually what happens is the mother leaves. She can't take raising 3 children anymore. And the 3 children are escorted off to foster care.
How did you use Laban to evolve this story into something physical that was communicable?
We broke down and talked about each of our characters. I left that completely free to them. These are the characters I want to head off. We actually started with a poem, and I can't recall which poem we actually started off with. And I asked them what they received from the poem. And they said, well, it sounds like a mom abandoning their kid. And I said, okay, let's go with that. Let's create characters. And so they each picked what kind of role they wanted to play. And then we talked about, okay, well, what is the purpose of them in this scene, in this moment, and at this time? For example, the middle sister is constantly watching mom. In each phrase, mom changes all the way up until she leaves. And her one thing is that she's constantly looking for mom's approval, constantly looking for mom's connection, constantly looking for, mom to be there. Even when mom leaves and the chair is empty, she's still looking at that chair. So she took that as her purpose, as that's what being a middle kid is. You have the older sibling and the younger sibling, and the middle sibling is left to do what? Look at mom, watch mom, be with mom. everything is mom. That's basically how we broke down each character, and then we just put them together in phrases.
When did they perform it?
No, we haven't performed it yet. I actually want to take them out into the community and do a little bit of invisible theater.
What does that mean?
Invisible theater is an Augusto Boal method. And basically, invisible theater is where actors go out into the public. They perform a skit or a scene, and the audience is whoever's around. The object is that the audience does not know that they are an audience.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about exposing my kids and also exposing the community as well.
And what do you hope that the students will learn from this?
One, I hope they would get over their fear of performing. Two, I hope that they will internalize it and not perform. So that's the key, is to make it as authentic as possible so that when we are out in public, that people will begin to watch and be taken in immediately because of how real it is, as opposed to, oh, they're just jerking us on. They're not for real.
You have a lot of technique in your background. It's very clear. What does theater mean to you?
Theater is a great medium. I think theater is not often used to the full extent of what it could be used for. For example, social justice or awareness. I have a few kids that are depressed. I have a few kids that are ADHD. I have autistic students, Asperger students that don't have any other activity in the community. And so they come and they socialize and, fellowship with us. And so we form basically this community of outcast and incast as well, I guess, and become a natural cast of characters of the world. And I think if we were able to use theater in that sense for everyday situations, everyday problem-solving skills, communication skills, what have you, that is really the hardcore. I mean, really, if you think about it, the Depression, even when people went to the Nickelodeons and they went to see the films, they did that to escape. They did that to escape their reality, which makes sense. But I think a lot of the times we need to bring people back to reality so that they can see what is happening right here in the community and how they can create conversation and awareness and change.
When did you know that this was the teaching was the path to really work on this creation of community and to use this medium?
I worked with a lot of, people say disadvantaged, I say different advantage children who either don't have access to the arts or children who have never been exposed to the arts. And I started with a volunteer job at our local Boys and Girls Club here in town. And I just started playing around with these kids and realized how hard their lives were or how much they could not verbally or physically express what their internal feelings were or what was happening at home. And I fell in love with that sense of being able to spark something in any kind of kid. I also was a preschool director for 5 years, and to be able to use the teachers as actors to, further our objective for the week or for the month and for kids to click and understand, I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do.
And because we've talked before, and I know that you were at a performing arts high school, so you must have had a different path when you first started out.
Yes. I was very talkative and very fidgety and smart mouth and smart. And my mom said, you know what, this drama needs to go somewhere. So she threw me into acting classes and a lot of scholarships with people helping me to get me exposed to a lot of culture as far as performing arts goes. When I went to my performing arts high school, we were a different type of kid. I found kids who were just like me, who were smart but couldn't sit down for more than 5 seconds. So I lived in this world of acceptance and culture and creativity.
It must have been amazing. Did you want to perform when you were young?
I did. I actually wanted to go to Broadway, and my mom said, I'm not quite sure about you going to New York right after high school, so why not stop and go to college? And so I said, all right, I'll go. Went to college, and then the whole teaching experience popped into my life, and I decided, performing is great, but it's not everything.
Yeah, there's a different way, isn't there?
Yes.
Well, there's a different way to use theater, and that it's not just performing out. It's a corny thing to say, but I think it, particularly at the student level who we work with, it can change their life.
Felicia Rashad has a quote that I think really reflects my thought as a theater teacher and director. And the quote is, theater is a discipline. Theater is about the discipline of having your entire instrument available in every moment. Theater is about the discipline of recreating anew what you did the day before. Theater is about people coming together, interacting, audience, performers, crew, and production. It's community. That is why theater lives, and that is why theater works.
As we end up here, let's bring it back to these students that you're working with. How do you think a month of working with Laban has changed them?
It's changed them as far as, even now, with just the little bit of adding that we're doing, it's made them more aware as an actor as opposed to themselves. So they are more aware of what they need to bring to the table for each character at each moment, at each time, as opposed to their own limits. Does that make sense?
I think so. It's sort of about stepping outside yourself, being able to get out of the teenager skin, which is the hardest thing for them. Do you find that as you continue to work with students that being in theater, particularly when they have so much trouble expressing themselves, that they are able to outlet?
Yes. And then they also able to create new relationships that they haven't been able to create before. They thought they would never be able to have created before. So it does help them release and get out of their own skin. And so they find a new level of a comfort as opposed to this tiny little box that you usually get when they first walk in through the door.
And where do you see yourself? What's your ideal? Where do you want to take this? Where do you want to be in 5 years? What do you want to do with theater?
In 5 years, whoa, I don't know. I would hope to have reached a huge population of advantaged and different advantaged students. Whether it's regional or national, teaching is my calling, it's my key. So hopefully that is the goal, is to just reach and teach as many people and educate people about the importance of theater and the arts in general.
I love that. Reaching and teaching, right? That's all we can do is just keep hammering at home that this is not about, jazz hands and shiny stars. This is about how we can use theater to communicate and to express and do all those wonderful things.
It's important, especially in this age of technology. I think a lot of students start to lose their sense of empathy and sympathy. And so if we can create a safe environment for them to be able to empathize with each other and be able to empathize with the human race in general as a whole, I think it goes beyond being able to perform on a stage. It goes into being a human and being a respecter of the human race.
Well, I can't think of anything better. Awesome. Thank you so much, LaTasha. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Same here.
Thank you, LaTasha. Any links that were mentioned in the interview, you can find them at theaterfolk.com/episode 81. Before we go, let's do some Theaterfolk news. Okay, so Theaterfolk is on the move. This upcoming weekend, which is February 28th, March 1st, we are going to be at the National Junior Thespian Festival. I am teaching workshops galore. Can't wait. Then March 6th to 8th, I'll be at SCTC, the Southeastern Theater Conference, also teaching workshops there. And then at the end of March, we'll be at the Florida Thespian Festival. If you are going to be at any one of these festivals or conferences, come up to our table, say hi. We'd love to meet you. Finally, where can you find this podcast? We post new episodes every Wednesday at theaterfolk.com and on our Facebook page and Twitter. You can find us on youtube.com/theaterfolk. You can find us on the Stitcher app, and you can subscribe to TFP on iTunes. Search on the word Theaterfolk and you will find us. Okay, that's where we're going to end. Take care, my friends. Take care.